we saw the Mustang.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kevin was telling me you saw it.
I liked it.
Yeah, we had the theater to ourselves.
I know,
was
right?
Fantastic. Yeah.
We went to a new theater on 57th Street.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So
we didn't go to
different
that one. We went to
Yeah.
one that's closer, but it's brand new.
Yeah.
And at 10 o'clock, I mean, nobody knows about this theater, and certainly nobody knows about it at 10 o'clock at night. So it was
Yeah.
literally me and Jeff
Yeah.
in the theater, and the guy came out and talked to us, and we
Oh,
played the movie.
Yeah, it was like we had a personal host at the theater.
It was cool.
He was great.
But it did, yeah, I felt like it related so much to last week's
Intense.
lesson and just
Yeah.
the healing that went on throughout the movie, even though the circumstances didn't really change. I thought
Yeah.
that was really beautifully displayed. It's a movie that's out called The Mustang, and last week our lesson was imprisonment and freedom, right?
Yeah.
Is that,
The difference between imprisonment and freedom. Yeah.
and that this prisoner didn't necessarily need to be released from prison in order to experience
Right.
freedom. But the circumstances were
Mhm.
the same throughout up until, I mean, it never changed. He still remained there.
Yeah, at the end, he was still in isolation, right? Like they put him in
Yeah.
isolation.
And also that unspeakable quality of communication that occurred through his a caretaking of this wild horse,
Yeah.
right? And how that, whatever the mystery is in that process, he gained a much deeper and greater insight into himself and into the meaning of his own life through essentially an encounter, a form of communication with an animal that did not speak in human concepts at all. And yet, there was this powerfully helpful form of communication that occurred in his bonding with this animal, and in the process that unfolded as he worked with this animal and discovered his own ability to fulfill that function and gain that quality of relationship, which is really beyond words. And his life changed out of the dynamic of that communication, which could never be described. I mean, how could you describe it? I mean, yet there was an understanding that spoke to him and to the horse as well through the experience, through the encounter that they shared, just being together on a consistent basis and having to communicate. And discovering ultimately that communication happened just by being there, just by showing up. And of course, you could say there was a tremendous help to him and to his ability to understand that came about because he couldn't use words. Horse had no capacity to understand words and was literally not going to respond to any of those usual things. So he had to find some aspect or quality of communication that was beyond his habits. And that took place, and the result was life-changing, deeply and powerfully life-changing for him and for the horse as well. So, all right, so, we read about imprisonment and freedom, and we had that discussion last week. Let's look at now as a starting point for those of you who might want to read along. Not necessary, but if you want to, you can. Still in the text, I'm still in chapter 8, The Journey Back, and I'm reading from subtitle 4, which is The Gift of Freedom. And we'll see what that leads to.
Sorry, chapter 4.
Yeah. No, it's chapter 8.
Chapter 8?
Oh,
Yeah,
chapter
The
8.
Journey Back, and subtitle 4.
Okay.
The Gift of Freedom. gift of freedom. Because freedom is a gift, freedom is a creative attribute given you in your creation. And begins with that idea. The subtitle is called The Gift of Freedom, and it reads, if God's will for you is complete peace and joy, unless you experience only this, you must be refusing to acknowledge his will. Which essentially human suffering is really that dynamic. It's a refusal, it's an objection to higher will, deeper will, original expression, original will. His will, God's will, does not vacillate, being changeless forever. It's one thing. It can't, it's totally unambiguous. There's no opposition, no contradiction in it, which is partly why it's difficult for human beings who are mired in their own dualistic thinking, find the simplicity of one thing, one experience, a difficult experience to grasp, because it's unlike all the information that they've, one way or another, adjusted to and use as a reference point to live their experience out of. So his will, God's will, does not vacillate, being changeless forever. There's nothing to vacillate between. It's one thing. When you are not at peace, it can only be because you do not believe you are in him or of him. Yet he is all in all. His peace is complete and you must be included in it. His laws govern you because they govern everything. You cannot exempt yourself from his laws, although you can disobey them. Yet if you do, and only if you do, you will feel lonely and helpless because you are denying yourself everything. You're denying yourself meaning. You're denying yourself spiritual connection, relationship. And you could see what that might lead to in terms of your own confusion, your own sense of being at a loss, your sense of uncertainty, your sense of being incomplete. As we continue, I am come as a light. I am come as a light into a world that does deny itself everything. It does this simply by dissociating itself from everything. That's the effect of separateness, of having a separate self-identity, of perceiving yourself as separate and apart in a relationship with everything else that is not you. It is therefore an illusion of isolation, right? Isolation can't really occur because God is not separate from his creation. God is not separate from any aspect of his creative will, his creative accomplishment. So in reality, separateness or separation or the separate self doesn't really exist. Although within the dreaming mentality of the world, it sure does appear to exist. Everything in our perception seems to suggest that separation is the lay of the land. But in this system, in this understanding, it clearly says and expresses the idea that perception, what I see with my eyes, think myself to hear with my ears, touch with my body, that all of that is an effect. Perception is an effect, not a fact. There's a decision senior to perception that gives rise to it. coming to recognize that, to become aware of it, conscious of it, is what we call waking up, awakening. Becoming awake in my dream of separation, in my dream of perception. And this, again, seems to be accomplished by dissociating myself from everything. That's what gives rise to the perception that Jeffrey is over here and Sam is over here and like that. And my couch and, you know, my roof and my guitars and all the stuff that I think myself to see. Anybody remember that movie, What the Bleep?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. In the Bleep, in that movie, What the Bleep, they referred to the discovery of, you know, the coming of Columbus's ships into
the Spanish
New World.
Armada going into the
They
South America.
Well, it was here. I think
No,
it was
it was
here.
in South America.
Might have
the
been.
Tribes in South America, when they went down there, they couldn't.
Might have
Right.
been, but they spoke about, they at least used the concept. I mean, we could never really confirm any of this, but they spoke about the concept that the native indigenous people couldn't really see the ships because they didn't know what a ship was. They didn't have the concept in mind that would allow them to perceive a ship, and so they couldn't see it, right?
They just saw the waves. They just saw the waves coming.
Well, they sensed or suspicion that there was something happening, but they didn't have the mechanism, the mental mechanism to actually see it. See, we take seeing for granted, right? We say, it's common to say in the human experience, seeing is believing. But the correction in this system of understanding is that believing makes seeing. I only see what I believe to be out there, what I believe to be already so, but rarely am I cognizant of that underlying belief. So I'm seeing the effects of my own mischievous will, but I'm not yet necessarily recognizing that I'm responsible for that I'm actually the cause of the experience that's so irritating. That's so despairing, that's so discouraging.
What about, let's say, like I was in the park the other day and somebody got mad at his dog and yanked the dog, and you know, and it brought up the lessons, you know, and the lesson was, you know, I only see the past, you know, and I'm preoccupied with past thoughts. And of course, I'm sitting there saying, what I'm seeing is a man abusing his dog, and that's wrong. But what I'm seeing is, I don't know what I'm seeing, right? Like, I don't really know what I'm seeing.
Begin, yeah.
And I'm putting a label on it because I want to see someone abusing their dog.
I don't know about that.
But I mean, that's where my mind goes at first, and then I can say, well, wait a minute, is that? It could be that. It could be that he's actually very friendly to his dog most of the time, and this happens only once every 10 years, and he had a breakup with his girlfriend, and I don't know what I'm seeing.
That's always the best place to begin.
Right.
Because it instantly and in one fell swoop frees you from your judgment, whatever that way of looking at something that produces some harsh,
that's the word.
You know, this uncomfortable sense of conflict, out of which I'm likely to assume things, feel things, take actions that may in fact not be very productive. Mm-hmm. When you start with the idea that I don't know what I'm seeing, I don't really know what's happening, that might liberate you, or is likely to liberate you, free you in a way where you might just act instantly in a extraordinarily benign way. You might just walk up to the guy and start asking him about his dog and petting the dog, or
calm it down.
Yeah, all of a sudden you know you don't know what you're going to do when you're operating out of that linear mind, the judgmental mind, the conflicted mind that never knows what to do, life happens. Life can happen. You will be stimulated in a way that's going to produce actions that are going to be atypical and likely lead to an experience that is more consistently in the best interests of everyone, all parties involved, right? So and as you become more acquainted with that foundation to think from, to be open to, and to be under the influence of, life really starts brightening up and becomes much more exciting, and you gain a sense of closeness and intimacy with things and with people that places you in a position of miraculous power and opportunity, where unimaginable recognitions can occur, out of which nonlinear experience can be shared, and where there was upset and discouragement and pain and anguish and perhaps a bad reaction that was only going to compound the situation, comes some act of deeper spiritual generosity, not arrived at through intellectual thinking, but arrived at through free will. And that miraculous nourishment that brings you into a deep and abiding sense of how important everyone and everything is to you. See, life is profoundly important to you. And you rarely, perhaps, are aware of that, because you don't allow yourself to be free of your own judgmental thinking, right? And anyone and everyone who's having a human experience or believes themselves to be having a human experience has judgments and biases and conflict. But it does not follow that you're locked into being an expression of that conflict, because God gives you free will. And your free will is not it's not undoable. You can't undo it.
It's not undoable.
Yeah, your free will cannot be altered. It's unalterable. All the tragic effects of human depression and guilt come out of the belief and the idea that you did do it.
Right.
That you found a way to overcome the law of life.
You're locked in.
Yeah, and that's why it's never going to go well for me. And I should downsize all my expectations and get comfortable with misery and suffering. I mean, this is how human beings tend to think, although rarely will they necessarily admit that. But, they say in the 12-step program that, what's that phrase that...
Insanity.
No, not that one. Not that one, although...
Is that all they say? Short phrase.
Men lead lives of quiet desperation. Men lead lives of quiet desperation. We stiff upper lip and all that. We put on a smiley face. We become some idea of ourselves that we think we need to in order to be acceptable, because at a more root, uncorrected state of mind, we feel pretty miserable about what we think ourselves to be. Pretty unmoved and uninspired by our interpretation of ourselves, our view of ourselves. And that's woefully unfair and unjust, and because it's untrue. All revelatory experiences really are moments when, for no explicable reason, you're able to gain 1 nanosecond of what's beyond time, where you're actually experiencing yourself and your relationship to everything else, creation and creator as one, in an instant of profound recognition. And there's no words for that. But in those moments, you are forever changed. You are no longer locked in to that sense of loss and belittlement that's characteristic and common in the human experience. By the way, the Course in Miracles, I don't know how much you know about it. I'm trying to give you an experience of what we do here.
No, it's perfect.
And whatever it is that you need to know, you'll let me know and we'll fill in the blanks in any way that works for you and is comfortable for you. So,
oh God.
it's because it's really hard to explain what this is.
Right.
And thank God there is no explanation. There's no real human explanation. But, you know, perhaps the best explanation is your experience.
Right.
Is that as you gain those moments, as we share moments, nonlinear moments of understanding beyond what we think ourselves to understand separately, what I hear and see is people start smiling and lightening up and feeling more at ease within their experience of being alive. I hear people laugh. See, there's more in that moment of laughter and in the peace and in the silence or the stillness that follows the laughter, you know, than in 99% of the things we share with words. I mean, words keep out far more than they actually let in. Joseph, was that you or was that Franklin?
Hey, Franklin, I would just add that in that nanosecond,
Yeah.
where you go to the other reality or the other, like it's like a quantum jump in consciousness. It's just
Yeah.
It's totally. It doesn't even relate to this level at all.
It's like exactly. It doesn't in any way diss anything that you thought or felt before. It just reveals it to be untrue and not the way it is. See, in the presence of reality, in the presence of love, loving expression, love's presence, Almighty God, you know, perfect creator creating, the entire hierarchy of human conditions eviscerates. It's undone. It's gone. It's obliterated. You know, biblically it's spoken about as the light that casts out all darkness. All darkness. Because in the presence of light, there's no darkness. There's no shadows. What's that? There's a beautiful African proverb that says, something about the light and shadows. Let's see if I don't know. It may come. It may not come.
I'll look it up while you keep talking.
Yeah, it's an African proverb. The roots of a tree cast no shadow. The roots of a tree cast no shadow. And it's really speaking about this deeper foundation that all living things share equally and unlimitedly. And none of that can be grokked within the human intellect, because the human intellect is essentially a system that disses all of that. It's against all of that. It's an objection to all of that. And in place of that understanding that surpasses human understanding, we have a system of concepts that leaves us in a lurch, leaves us short of the mark, it leaves us uncomfortable, leaves us with poison ivy, you know? That sense of I'm going to need, you know. So in the business of learning to listen, in the business of not paying so much attention to the words and the things I think myself to see, I then even though I may not recognize it, I'm starting to listen to what's beyond all that. It's a more expansive field of communication. By not, in the Bible, it's often mentioned about Jesus, his experience of when people would look at him, he was never really looking at anybody. But he was seeing everything and seeing everyone. Because in the act of not being so concerned with what or who I think Sam is, and where I think he is, the form I think he's occupying, I can really gain access to him everywhere else. Over here too, right? But in the broader arena of where he really is and what he really is. Because what is Sam? What is Ilsa? What is Steve? What is a Jeffrey? What is a Liliket? What's a Kevin? What's a Honora, an Ivy, a Franklin, or Joseph? But an abstraction occurring in the mind of God. Creation happening. You're a living happening. You're the evidence. But in order to gain the influence of that evidence, you have to park your intellectual, conceptual thinking, which is really a restriction. It's a governor. It keeps you from seeing. What you think you see gets in the way of what can be seen. What you think you hear gets in the way of what can be heard, right? We often talk about the idea that as good as it's going to get in your human experience is you gain this broader, deeper, more expansive experience of being is you quiet down. You do a lot more listening and paying attention and a lot less reacting to what you think you're hearing or think yourself to sing. And there's this whole universe of possibility that then opens itself up to you. As you go about the business of expressing divine will, a greater will, and get to witness in your own experience the effects of that, which will powerfully and deeply humble you and realize and help you realize in a loving and gentle but firm way that I didn't know anything. I didn't really, all that stuff I thought just got in the way. But from this new experience of bigger mind, God is the mind with which I think, including that unfathomable creative influence we call the will of God, you gain ears to hear. And your eyes work differently, and now not in a nonlinear way. And there's no words to explain how that happens, but that happens very organically and authentically and very beautifully, and it leaves you deeply and powerfully moved and changed forever. And your life experience begins to reflect that as you act in accordance with it, as you serve that will, as you want to do that will, as you realize that your pleasure, that your happiness, that your peace of mind is all about sharing that kind of experience, out of which most of the time you won't even know what you're doing. You'll be sitting there, what am I saying? What am I talking about? But it won't even matter because the experience will reflect back to you a deeper experience of understanding that's really nonlinear, non-conceptual, non-intellectual, powerfully abstract and spiritual and moving, leaving no doubt, no uncertainty whatsoever in your inner experience of who you are, what you are, and your relationship to God's gift to you, which is all creation. So I'm off and running here.
Yes.
I want to return to, I also want to give Sam just a little bit of information if you know or don't know this. The course was a channeled work. Or you know about that? Do you know, you have some back. So you know it's 3 volumes, it's a text, it's a workbook for students, and it's a manual for teachers. Okay, great. All right. You know.
I appreciate it.
Sure. So let's see. You guys out there in telephone land, how are you doing? Any questions? Anything you want to share? Thanks, Franklin, for your insight about that quantum. Revelation is akin to a quantum leap.
Yes.
We often speak about it as a leap of faith. It's a shift out of all I thought I knew into knowledge.
Yeah, I think that's where I thought I met you once.
I'm sure you did. I'm sure that experience, see, that's really at the root of everything. That really speaks of your true relationship with every aspect of a living creation. You know it, and it knows you intimately, because whatever it is and whatever you are is all of that. You really have no location. You have no position. You're everywhere, everything always. You're here, there, and everywhere, as John Lennon and McCartney spoke about it, sang about it. And you can get to know yourself through the blessing, through the joy of sharing communication with any living thing. You can be restored to that sense of your own expansive, abstract nature and reality, because it's always here. It's always,
Jeff,
yeah.
I just wanted to, I know what you were just talking about and you were answering a question, but I just was wondering about when you were talking about acting from free will instead of from the conditioned state.
Yeah.
And how that the free will is unalterable and that depression is acting from the idea that I did it. I was wondering if you could talk about that a little more, because I don't even know if I've ever acted from free will.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I must have, but I just don't know.
Yes, you certainly have and did, whatever did means, and are now, and will continue to, whatever that means, because free will is the law of creation. It's not up for voting. You don't get to vote on free will. Free will is essentially what you are. Love is essentially...
So there isn't a choice.
Well, there appears to be a choice in the dynamic of human contradictory, conflicted thinking. In this dualistic realm of what we hold as opposites. See, in reality, there are no opposites. What does it say on page 1 of the introduction? The purpose of this course is not to teach you the meaning of love, because that cannot be taught.
And only the truth is true.
Well, only the truth is true, and what it says about love, what can have no opposites, has no opposite.
Right.
So, these abstract principles are given at the very, very early part of the course in a very simple and unassuming way, page 1, leading up to those 3 remarks. Nothing real can be threatened. Therefore, this course can be summed up in one way. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God.
So we're acting from an illusion if
Yes.
we think otherwise.
Yes. Miracles are beautiful illusions that in reality make no sense because they're completely unnecessary. See, in whatever that state we call heaven is, that state of perfect creation, miracles would have nothing to do. Their purpose is to free the mind from what it only thought, and thereby restore it to what it truly thought and thinks, thought in the beginning, thinks now, and will continue to think for all eternity, because there's no choice in that. You can't undo, you can't overcome the will of the Father. Not possible. That's why your will is free. That's why reality is one thing. That's why love is what you are. And that's why all of that historical content that causes you much, let's say, distractedness and sometimes grief, you can let go of any time you want to. Why? Because none of it is true. They're all representative of what this system, this teaching, this teacher speaks of as error. And errors, mistakes, are not crimes. Because there was never a moment where any of those apparent errors had any effect on the indwelling fundamental reality of creator creating. So all human fear-based suffrage has no source, even though that's a rough idea for most humans to consider and accept. But ultimately, everyone gets over that mentality because it's unsustainable. It'll make you sick. It'll keep you in those loops of downward spiraling thinking and feeling and behavior that literally makes you sick. It'll keep you in that loop. And eventually you reach that point of saturation where you're just sick and tired of being sick. And something else will happen. Very often we see that that's what revelation is, when there's that readiness to move on. We often see that in the form of nervous breakdowns, when people just cannot carry that depressing, demoralizing, debilitating mentality, and they let go of it, or it just collapses under its own dysfunction. And people have, all of a sudden, they brighten up and, you know, they think themselves to be Moses, or Jesus, or Mary, or Joseph, or, you know, they're having, they absolutely are. They are that greater self, that unified self. They are that. What does it say? What does it say in the Bible? That I am that I am. Well, if God is I am that I am, well, what does that make you? You're of that ilk. So, you know, and in this system, it says very beautiful. It says you cannot make your misperceptions true. You cannot make your misperceptions true. And your reality is beyond your own error. Your reality is beyond your own error. And that is why you must and will and did eventually choose to correct your thinking. To stop throwing your mind away on meaningless thoughts. And this system does speak from that out-of-time perspective called in the beginning and at the end, the Alpha and the Omega. And it says, by the way, you know, God got it right. All that optional stuff you think to be optional that causes you so much distraction and grief never really happened. And those memories will depart you as you let them go. As you practice your own natural, organic, authentic ability to just be. Not to be that way or the way I think myself to be, to just be as God created me. Even if you don't know what that means. You don't have to understand any of this in an intellectual, limited, egocentric framework. In fact, true understanding necessitates that you humble up and set all that aside. And trust in the fact that as you gain true understanding, whatever use there is to your historical memory, that'll stay with you and be useful to you for the rest of your time-space experience until you don't need it anymore. But it'll be useful to you not as a means to condemn yourself and belittle yourself and scold yourself and make yourself miserable. It'll be useful to you in a way that you can share those references in a way and in a manner that leads beyond them. You can share them in a miraculous way where they do good and are in the best interests of everyone. Because that's your nature. You know, you're all good. You're good. Like the end of that Robert De Niro, Billy Crystal movie, you know, where Robert De Niro keeps saying to Billy Crystal, you're good, you're good. You know, what's the name of that one? Analyze this, and then there's analyze that. Yeah, you're good, you're good. You, yeah, yeah. All right, let's read a little bit more. I don't know where I left off. If I'm wrong, somebody correct me. But
At the beginning.
yeah, we're at the beginning again. Yeah, you know, whatever we're up, whatever that is, and of course, and that always empowers us to go on from here, lighthearted and free, and without all that ballast. You know, that dense human stuff that's going to make it effortful and, you know, wearyful. For what? Has nothing to do with your nature, with your true function of mind. The reason you can afford to let go of those historical thoughts that are so problematic for you is because they essentially never happened. They're part of your dream. And no matter how much you talk about the nightmare you had this morning or last night, you really can never really convince yourself or anybody else that it ever really happened. And this system, this teacher, this teaching speaks of the idea that what you consider to be your being awake is still a form of dreaming. Mm-hmm. You're not seeing the complete picture because you've already dissociated yourself from yourself. You don't know how good you are. You don't know of your own goodness. All right, so I said that I am with you, I said that I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. That is why I am the light of the world. If I am with you in the loneliness of the world, then the loneliness is gone. You cannot maintain You cannot maintain the illusion of loneliness if you are not alone. That's why part of the mental practice is making your mind ready, is mentally adjusting your thinking so you're not always affirming or declaring that your own false thinking is true. You're actually working your mind in a different way now. You're letting go of those distortions and allowing the truth to be true, even if you don't believe it. Remember, very, very clear in this teaching, it said you don't have to believe it, you don't have to like it, just do it. And the doing of it, the practicing of it, the sharing of the experience will convince you of itself. Mm-hmm. How we doing time-wise? Good, it's 8 o'clock, so.
What is the I in the text here? Because I hadn't heard much of it.
Yeah, great. Yeah, we're talking about that universal aspect of holy self, the sacred creation, right? God in the Bible, it's often quoted and misunderstood that God created, God has one son, right? Where human beings tend to get a little hung up is that they don't realize that that one son is a universal unfoldment unto each and every living thing. That all the living aspects of creation are all part of that unified expression. Everything. There's only one of us here. There's only God and his accomplishment. So that I is the expression of that fundamental, unalterable principle we call truth, reality. expressing itself in this form. And there are many forms all throughout the spiritual teachings, teachers, history of the world. Any aspect of this that really speaks from that broader, deeper, higher expression of authenticity, it's all the same thing, just given cultural forms that were consistent with perhaps the person who had the experience who was expressing it, But the reality behind the voice and the body that seems to representing it is that universal self. It's God's perfectly loving expression in the form of his creation. You get what I'm saying there, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, what does get mean?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so, yeah, I knew the answer to it before I asked the question. So, this is something that at our root experience, at our fundamental experience, we all know. But we all get to that knowing in our own way and in our own time, right? Because, there's no obligation associated with awakening or the truth. It's just the way it is, and how and when you get to it is up to you. So again, when we speak of I am that I am, we're speaking about the unified expression of perfect will, of holiness itself, the incomprehensible, unfathomable reality of one thing, one voice, one creation, one expression, one reality, in which everything is whole and perfect and never at a loss, in which there is never any lack, because perfect love can never be lacking. And perfect love is what I am. Perfect love is what you are. Perfect love is what is to any mind that would receive it, to any mind would let it be so, would humble up enough to be willing to see that and learn of that, so that I wouldn't, I would give up my role, right? Fundamentally, revelatory experience or miracles liberate you from your need to defend your point of view. You give up your point of view in order to gain that unified experience of association, of relationship, which has no consequence and no cost whatsoever. Why wouldn't I want to give up everything that causes me so much grief and so much pain associated with my separate thinking? It's in my best interest to let go of any of that. And I come into my own and operate and become functional when I permit myself, choose for that to happen. I encounter influences that I have no words for. I discover things about what I play as a guitarist, or I'm able to express and share with others that are powerfully and beautifully moving and humbling and empowering to me. And I'd rather have that kind of experience than return to my tried methodology, my effortful methodology of just doing it the way Jeffrey thinks it should be done. Right? Biblically speaking, in the Christian tradition, there's reference that Jesus would often say, "Not my will, thy will be done." Right? He was and he was clear as a bell in expression, in expressing the idea that my will, and by the way, his will is my will. I got that straight. I finally sorted that out. Right? So, and that's when you enter into this field of incomprehensible understanding, the likes of which presents to you and reveals to you deeply moving, humbling inner experience that cannot be denied. That reveals to you that simple, fundamental fact that only the truth is true, and in that my life could never be a problem. Suffering would be impossible in the dynamic of my relationship with my Holy Father, who I realize through my holy relationship with you, whether I know your name or not. Because it's all the same thing. The name I give it, the word I associate with it is just the name I give it and the word I associate with it. What's powerfully, fundamentally, essentially most important is that I know what it is. That I allow the reality of what it is to inform me. So I'm not stuck in my perception of who I think you to be. I have all those thoughts. I'm just not interested in them because they don't lead anywhere. They're not productive. You know, they don't produce the experience I want to be having, which I'm capable of having.
They also make your life totally repetitive.
Yeah, and yeah, historical thinking, limited thinking.
It is the problem of the world, right? Like,
habitual thinking makes me repetitive, makes me predictable, but not creative.
mm-hmm.
And everyone has an experience of that's problematic in their own thinking. But without much effort at all, could discover a way out of. There are many, all roads lead to Rome. All teachings, all paths lead to God, to creation. Whatever you choose to be your methodology is up to you. And essentially, as you become more and more associated with your own free spirit, everything gets that job done. Everything provokes you in that way. Moses hears a burning bush, At some mundane event, people hear angels, or they see angels, or a cloud passes over, and they're sure it was God's blessing. In all of the mundane features of their worldly perception, they begin to experience unworldly or beyond the world information, content. Because nothing is really mundane. The world I think myself to be in doesn't really exist. And there's this whole other living dynamic that I can become aware of that's in my best interest too. It produces big bang for your buck. Feel good, deep, soulful, unforgettable feel good, empowerment, well-being, out of which you discover that you're capable and can do things you didn't think you could do as a musician, as a writer, as a whatever it is, painter. We often speak about that famous painter who was commenting, about from his experience, and his comment was that it's only when the painter no longer knows what they're doing that the work is any good. Mm-hmm. You're capable of realizing a state that's completely beyond your own thought process, out of which you will witness unimaginable capacity and abilities. That's pretty good. Getting excited and inspired in this impossible, mundane situation, which I think myself to be in. That mundane situation really doesn't exist except in my thinking. And it comes at a cost. So, all right, so let's read on a little bit. 8:10. So if I am with you in the if I, God's voice, I am that I am is with you in the perceived loneliness of the world you think yourself to be in, then the loneliness is gone. See what I'm saying? The loneliness is gone, it doesn't it? And if it's gone now, then where was it a minute ago? But I saw it. Well, did you see it, or did you think you saw it, out of which you perceived something that you think confirms what you think you're... it's a loop.
Yeah,
You're creating these feedback loops that rob you and deprive you of your free will, of your joy, of your sense and direct, intimate experience of being fabulously alive. You are fabulously alive. Fabuloso. And then he goes on to say, you cannot maintain the illusion of loneliness if you're not alone. And the I am factor is always your witness in any given moment to remind you that you are not alone. All that stuff you think yourself to be thinking gives you a perceivable experience of isolation, but all the while you are not alone. You are never alone. Aloneness is impossible. My purpose then, which is the same as yours, is still to overcome the world, or my illusion of the world. This is so beautiful. He says, I do not attack it. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. Right? He says, I do not attack it, but my light must dispel it because of what it is. Light dispels darkness because darkness doesn't really exist. When you see a shadow, right? What's the content of a shadow?
Nothing.
Yeah, there's nothing there. Isn't science revealing and indicating to us that the more we look into what we call the nature of things, the less we see. We don't recognize anything. They're now talking about how 96% of the universe, scientists, advanced progressive science is now saying is dark matter. We're calling it dark matter because we don't know what it is. It's living intelligence. It's infinite creation creating. But human minds are poised to overlook all that in favor of what it seems to think. You're going to get over that tendency because it cannot be sustained. So my purpose then is still to overcome the world. I do not attack it, but my light must dispel it because of what it is. What is it? It's an illusion. Mm-hmm. But I see it. I see it because I have a thought that I can see it, that it's there. And then lo and behold, it appears. Light does not attack darkness, but it does shine it away. If my light goes with you everywhere, you shine it away with me. The light becomes ours, and you cannot abide in darkness any more than darkness can abide wherever you go. Mm-hmm. Right? Because fundamentally, as God created, accomplished, got the job done, you are the light of the world. You are the expression of infinite radiance. That's what you are. The light becomes ours because it's a universal experience. It doesn't belong to Sam any more than it belongs to Liliket or Steve or Ilsa, Kevin, me. It's universal. It's everywhere. It's divine. It's a divine gift. It's God's gift. It's the gift of life. It's life itself. So the light becomes ours because it is ours. It's universally distributed. And you cannot abide in darkness any more than darkness can abide wherever you go because you are that light. You are that I am presence in expression. You're self-evidence. You're the evidence of God creating. You're the effect. And that's how you should see yourself. It'll change radically your thinking. The remembrance of me, whoever this me is. Who is this me? It's this universal I. It's this universal self. It's this Holy Spirit, which is everywhere unto every living thing. The remembrance of me is the remembrance of yourself, because whatever that me is, it's you. It's everywhere. It's in everyone. It's in every living thing. It's the breath of life. It's God in expression. How can you have a problem with that? You can't really, not if you're willing to come under the understanding of it. So the remembrance of this me that we call this universal self, Holy Son, is the remembrance of yourself and simultaneously of him who sent me to you. All right, so where are we now? 8:17. So I'll read one more paragraph. You were in darkness until God's will was done completely by any part of the sonship. When this was done, it was perfectly accomplished by all. And actually, that occurred in what we call the beginning. And that's to say that in the beginning, all was well. And the beginning, as God knows beginning, knows no end. Right? The idea of this Alpha and Omega are one, what we consider to be at the end is actually the beginning, appearing in what we call an end, because we tend to try to push it away into a form we call time. We don't want the beginning to be now, so we can have now to ourselves, out of which we wreak havoc on our system. So you were in darkness until God's will was done completely by any part of the sonship. And in the mind of God, God's will was done completely in the beginning. And nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. When this was done, it was perfectly accomplished by all. Because that's the nature of perfect creator, creating perfectly. It can't screw up. You can't screw it up, even though, you may think yourself to have done that, or you may consider that's a meaningful thought to contemplate. I don't recommend it. So you were in darkness until God's will was done completely by any part of the sonship. When this was done, it was perfectly accomplished by all. And by the way, it was done in the beginning, which is true at the end, because it's the same, which means that now is, and now, right? Because in the mind of God, his mind is unalterable. The unshakable expression of God creating is unalterable. It makes one thing. And that one thing is deeply moving to you and essential to you, and the nature of what and who you are. So when this was done, it was perfectly accomplished by all. And by the way, it was done in the beginning, which means it'll be true at the end, which means it's true now. My mission, whoever this character is, was simply to unite the will. My mission was simply to unite the will of the sonship with the will of the Father by being aware of the Father's will myself. Now, any good teacher knows that they don't know anything that the other doesn't know. They serve as that temporary bridge for as long as the other seems to require one or thinks themselves to be in need of one. So the teacher, I don't know, sprinkles fairy dust on them or, says something. But the root and the core, the miracle in the expression of a good teacher, of true teaching, is that it's just rooted in the perfect certainty that the other knows this already. And therefore, they don't need to hear me talk about it. But if if there's any wanting to hear me talk about it, I'll be happy to talk about it, right? But the whole principle, what gives humor and levity and motion, healthy motion, and frees you up so your belly can move and your energy can start to move in you and you can feel some excitement in your being alive, is a fundamental function of knowing that they know. It knows what it is. How could what God created not know itself? And through itself, its source. It's impossible. It's only meaningful in the realm of egotistical thinking, which is a mess. So my mission was simply to unite the will of the sonship with the will of the Father by being aware of the Father's will myself. The way I remain aware of the Father's will myself is with you. I share that kind of experience with you, and you don't think I'm insane. You know, you don't think I'm a nutcase. You come back the next week. You know, you don't get disgusted with me. You don't get, you know, perturbed. You know, you laugh with me. And I seem to have an experience, correct me if I'm wrong, that we lighten up together. That we do this thing for what appears to be an hour and a half, and we all go away feeling somewhat soothed and relieved in our experience of being alive. We're comforted. Whatever we can realize together, that's the essence of this thing we call Holy Spirit, we're capable of sharing that, and we benefit unlimitedly in the sharing of that. We benefit from it. We are enlivened by it, enriched by it, made joyful, brought to our knees in peace and quiet, thank God. You know, my mind isn't raging now. How good is that? You know? I'm not getting sucker punched by my own foolish thinking.
Which leaves me more useful in the world.
Totally.
With the people in my life, my friends, my family, at work, when I'm by myself, with others.
Because what you're describing is spiritual resonance. When you are accepting, recognizing, accepting, and expressing your free will, your mind gets extraordinarily quiet and powerful and expressive. And your deeds become moving. Your presence becomes moving. And if you need to say something, you may say a thing or two and people will get something from that, including yourself. You know, like, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I feel lighter just expressing these ideas, whatever they are. You know?
Yes.
So,
Jeffrey?
Yeah.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, man. I'm here. Are you hearing me, Franklin?
Yeah. Is it possible that we could say that God and God's creation are inseparable, so therefore God and creation are one and the same?
Totally. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that's perfectly spot on to me, and I'm happy to hear you say it. Just to hear you say it. You know, that's resonance, you know, when you show up in that original function and form as a holy communicator, when you show up in that way, Sam, if you need the bathroom, it's right down the hallway. Yeah, you'll see it. When you show up in that way, the universe is rocking in you. And that is an unforgettable quality and characteristic that instantly resonates everywhere throughout the entirety of the creation, which means without uttering a single word, you're already rocking the world. The world is rocking with you. You're in that resonant, indescribable experience, undescribable experience of true communication, which is beyond words, beyond the intellect, you don't have to say a damn thing.
Yeah,
You know?
I would say tonight's experience has been shifting. I've definitely felt some shifts take place tonight.
Yeah, man. Why not? Why would that not be the case? You know, over and over again, certainly in this system, we're reminded that you can have all that and more.
Yeah, like all the time.
But like all the time. if you feel you'd like that all the time. Yeah, I want it all the time. I'd be crazy. And of course, human thinking is the craziness that seems to suggest otherwise. Well, I don't want it now. I'll get back to it next Tuesday night if I feel like it. You know, yeah, I mean, you know, there's more of that available than you can recognize. And yet it will happily witness for you and provide the direct, intimate experience of that whenever you ask it to.
It's like that country western song, I want to go to heaven, but I don't want to go tonight.
Yeah, we'll look at reflecting on a country and western song that says, I want to go to heaven, but I don't want to go tonight. You know, as that state of mind having to do with this illusory system called the ego, you know. Did we lose our call? You guys still here?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's so weird.
All right.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, good. So, I don't know, maybe, I don't know. I don't know anything. And it works perfectly. So, all right, so we'll finish up a couple more sentences and we're done with this paragraph and we'll stop there. It's been a great evening and, you know, mission accomplished, whatever that is. So, this is the awareness I came to give you, and your problem in accepting it is the problem of this world. Dispelling it, dispelling this illusion, this problematic, messy illusion of a world of conflict, of degradement, of belittlement, of sadness and terror, of inacceptance. Dispelling that illusion is what salvation is. It is salvation in this sense. I am, right? This I am, what that I is, I am the salvation of the world. That experience, that whatever it is, is the salvation of the world. It's the way out of that limited, linear, problematic mode of thinking. Then he says, the world must therefore despise and reject me, because the world is the belief that love is impossible. And every one of your favored biases associated with a world that seems to be the way you think it to be is self-belittlement, inacceptance. It always comes at a cost. Someone always has to pay for you to keep that world. There's got to be a fall person, a fall guy, something to diss, to not like. So the world must therefore despise and reject me, because the world is the belief that love is impossible. And, you know, love is what you are. Love is what that I am is. If you will accept the fact that I am with you, if you will accept the fact that I am, whatever I am is with you, you are denying the world and accepting God, which I recommend. My will is his, and your decision to hear me is the decision to hear his voice and abide in his will, which is where you really are. As God sent me to you, so will I send you to others. That's what happens naturally as you come under creative will. You're guided by that deeper emotional, out of time, space influence, energy, which is powerfully attractive and appealing to you. As you get little hints of it in your experience, you can never go back to being the way you think you were. So If you will accept the fact that I'm with you, you are denying the world and accepting God. My will is his, and your decision to hear me is the direction to hear his voice and abide in his will. As God sent me to you, so will I send you to others. And I will go to them with you. So we can teach them peace and union, because it's an all-for-one experience. It's everything, all of the aspects of the unlimited living creation are you're going to have a lonely night again. You know. All right, so let's stop there because it's good. It's a good place to stop. So
Great, thanks, Jeff.
yeah, anything else?
No, it's so beautiful, and that is so incredible. And I had such a, just this exact experience today. It's just amazing.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. You know, it's beautiful the way it works synergistically.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, I'm amazed. I don't understand. And I'm thankful that I don't need to understand.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I just need to keep
Right.
doing whatever this is, you know, whatever this thing we call thy will be done, you know, that's just feels like,
You just keep showing up. That's all that matters.
yeah, exactly. And it's my pleasure to do so. It's an honor and pleasure to do so. And I'm not speaking about just Tuesday nights at Jeffrey's. I'm talking about in life, you know, just stepping up to being alive, you know, accepting and being responsible for the joy of being alive, you know, being what I am and who I am, and, you know, the pleasure, the deep, moving pleasure it is in sharing that kind of experience with others, you know. What else are you going to do? All right, so you're beautiful. I love you. It just warms my heart and brightens my mind and makes me laugh in a deep and meaningful way to have your company and share this friendship with you, including you, of course, Sam. You know, so and all you guys here, all you guys out there in telephone land, and thank you wholeheartedly. I thank you, and to be continued for as long as you want to continue.
Thank you,
Thanks so
Jeff.
much,
Thank you
Jeff.
so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, man.